Churches burn, fleets sail, crowns change. The 16th century tears itself apart over God. Faith didn't just divide hearts. In the 1500s, faith divided nations and started wars. From Rome's great councils to Paris's bleeding streets, the world bled for belief. This is the 16th century. Part 3. Wars of Religion. 1540 to 1570. Suleiman, the magnificent Ottoman Empire at its absolute peak. Vienna trembled. The Mediterranean bowed. Hernan courts had shattered the Aztec world. Tenochtitlan, the greatest city in the Americas, was gone. Martin Luther stood defiant at Worms. The Reformation was no longer an idea, it was a movement. Francisco Pizarro had destroyed the Inca Empire. Atahualpa was dead. South America was falling. Henry VIII had broken with Rome. England now had its own church and its own God. John Calvin had transformed Geneva into a Protestant republic. A harder, colder Reformation was spreading. And Charles V, the most powerful man in Europe, was exhausted. His empire was cracking. Now everything changes. Religion stops being a debate. Religion becomes war. Chapter 1. The Council of Trent. The Catholic Church finally decides it will fight back. The Church was losing. Protestant movements were spreading across Germany, England, Scandinavia. Rome was in crisis. Pope Paul III understood the Church couldn't just condemn. It had to reform from within. In 1545, bishops and cardinals gathered in the Italian city of Trent. History was about to be made. For years, theologians debated scripture, sacraments, salvation. Catholic doctrine was being sharpened like a sword. The council rejected Protestant ideas completely, but acknowledged real Catholic abuses, both sides of the truth. Seminaries were established. Priests would now be properly trained. No more ignorant clergy representing Christ. The selling of indulgences, the scandal that launched Luther, was officially reformed. The Church admitted its sin. The council met across 18 years minus 1545 to 1563, patient, thorough, and determined to survive. What emerged was a confident Reformed Catholicism. The Counter-Reformation had found its doctrine and its direction. Chapter 2. The Jesuits. If Trent gave Catholics doctrine, the Jesuits gave them soldiers. Ignatius of Loyola, a Spanish knight turned priest. His weapon, the spiritual exercises. His mission, souls. In 1540, Pope Paul III approved the Society of Jesus. The Jesuits were born, elite, disciplined, brilliant. Jesuit schools became the finest in Europe. They didn't just save Catholic souls, they trained Catholic minds, and they didn't stay in Europe. Francis Xavier sailed east, to India, to Japan, to the world. In Japan, Jesuit missionaries met samurai culture face to face. Christianity had arrived in the Far East. In South America, Jesuits built missions among indigenous peoples. Complex, contradictory, but undeniably ambitious. Back in Europe, Jesuit schools were winning back Protestant territories, one educated generation at a time. Jesuit confessors whispered to kings. Jesuit teachers shaped the next generation. The Catholic comeback was real. Chapter 3. Charles V abdicates. The greatest emperor of the age finally admits he is broken. Charles had fought his whole life. Protestants, Ottomans, French kings. Decades of war had hollowed him out. Look at his map. Spain, Netherlands, Austria, Italy, the Americas. No single man could hold all this. In 1555, the Peace of Augsburg offered a compromise. Each German prince could choose his own religion. Cuius regio ius religio, whose realm, his religion. Germany was officially, permanently, religiously divided. Then in 1556, Charles did something no emperor had ever done. He took off the crown and walked away. He split his empire in two. Philip II received Spain and the Netherlands. Ferdinand received Austria and the Empire. Charles V retired to a monastery in Spain. The most powerful man in Europe, now a monk. He died in 1558, the greatest ruler of his age, buried simply. An era was over. Chapter 4. Philip II of Spain. The most powerful king on earth and the most dangerous Catholic. Philip II inherited the largest empire the world had ever seen. Spain was at its absolute peak. He built the Escorial, a massive palace, monastery, library, and royal tomb combined. Power and piety in stone. His empire stretched from the Americas to the Philippines, named after Philip himself. The sun truly never set. Silver poured in from Potosi mines in Bolivia. Spanish treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic every year. Philip saw himself as God's champion. His mission: defend Catholicism against every Protestant threat in Europe. The Spanish Inquisition under Philip was relentless. Heresy was hunted. Religious uniformity was enforced through fear. Philip governed from his desk at the Escorial, reading every document, signing every order, a king of paperwork. Chapter 5. Elizabeth I of England. A Protestant queen, a Catholic world, an extraordinary political survival. England in 1558 was exhausted. Mary Tudor's Catholic persecutions had left the nation traumatized and divided. Elizabeth was crowned in November 1558, 25 years old, Protestant, brilliant, and completely alone at the top. Red hair, white face, calculating eyes. She had survived imprisonment, plots, and executions just to reach this throne. Her religious settlement of 1559 created a moderate Anglican church, a middle way between Rome and Geneva. She refused every marriage proposal. The Virgin Queen, she called herself. Her independence was her greatest weapon. Under Elizabeth, English culture exploded. Theater, poetry, exploration. Shakespeare's world was being born, but danger was everywhere. Mary Queen of Scots, Spanish plots. Catholic assassination attempts. Elizabeth outmaneuvered them all. Her navy was growing. Ships were being built. England was quietly becoming a maritime power. Elizabeth and Philip II watched each other across the channel. Protestant versus Catholic. The confrontation was coming. Chapter 6. Ivan the Terrible. Russia's first Tsar and history's most terrifying transformation. Moscow in the 1540s was a growing power. Orthodox churches, vast frozen lands, and rising ambition. In 1547, Ivan IV was crowned the first Tsar of Russia. Caesar's heir. A new empire was declared. As a child, Ivan had been abused by the boyar nobles. That trauma never left him. Never. His early years were actually impressive. New laws, military reforms, administrative improvements. A promising ruler emerging. In 1552, Ivan conquered the Tatar Khanate of Kazan, a Muslim stronghold, defeated. Russia was expanding east. To celebrate Kazan, Ivan built St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. Those colorful domes became Russia's eternal symbol. By 1556, Astrakhan fell too. Russia now controlled the entire Volga River and reached the Caspian Sea. Then in 1560, his beloved wife Anastasia died. And something inside Ivan the man died with her. Paranoia consumed him. He saw conspiracies everywhere. Advisors he had trusted for years became enemies overnight. He created the Oprichnina, a secret police force dressed in black, riding black horses, carrying dog heads. The Oprichniki terrorized Russian nobility. Estates were seized. Families were destroyed. Loyalty was now enforced through terror. The Novgorod massacre. Thousands killed. A great city destroyed. Ivan the Terrible had earned his name. Meanwhile, Russian expansion into Siberia was beginning. A continental empire stretching toward the Pacific was forming. Chapter 7. The French Wars of Religion. The kingdom that nearly destroyed itself in the name of God. France in 1560 was the most powerful kingdom in Western Europe, but it was religiously cracking apart. Calvinist Protestants, called Huguenots, were perhaps 10% of France. But they were concentrated, organized, and growing. Queen Mother Catherine de' Medici held real power behind her young sons. A political survivor above all else. King Francis II died young. Charles IX was a child king. Weak monarchy meant dangerous power vacuums. Two noble families chose sides. The Catholic Guise family versus the Protestant Bourbon family. Religion became politics. The Duke of Guise led the Catholic faction. Powerful, fanatical, and determined to crush the Protestant heresy. In 1562 at Vassy, Guise soldiers massacred Huguenot worshippers at prayer. The first blood had been drawn. The first French war of religion erupted. Cities chose sides, armies formed. A kingdom began eating itself. Battles swept across France. Towns burned, harvests rotted. Brothers killed brothers over the same God's name. Peace treaties were signed, then broken. Truces held briefly, then collapsed. The cycle of hatred deepened, 8 separate wars of religion. 1562 to 1598, 36 years of suffering. France would be permanently scarred. Chapter 8. Suleiman's final years, the most magnificent sultan in Ottoman history, fading into shadow. Suleiman had ruled for 40 years. No Ottoman sultan had reigned longer. The empire was transformed, but so was he. Hurrem Sultan Roxolana had risen to unprecedented power. A queen in the harem, a politician in the court. Prince Mustafa, Suleiman's most capable son, was executed, allegedly through Hurrem's plotting, a dynasty wounded by suspicion. Suleiman grieved. He grew old. The loneliness of absolute power had caught up with the magnificent. The Suleimani Mosque rose over Istanbul, architect Sinan's masterpiece. Ottoman civilization at its most beautiful and complete. In the Mediterranean, Ottoman naval power remained dominant. North Africa was controlled. Christian shipping lived in fear. But in 1565, at the siege of Malta, the Knights Hospitaller held firm. The Ottomans were turned back. Malta did not fall. For the first time in a generation, the Ottomans had hit a real limit. In 1566, 71 years old and barely able to ride, Suleiman launched his final campaign into Hungary. The fortress of Shigevver resisted. The defenders fought with everything they had. So did the Ottomans. Suleiman died in his tent during the siege, September 1566. His death was hidden from the army for days. Selim II inherited the empire, a lesser man. The golden age of the Ottomans had quietly ended. After Babur founded the Mughal Empire, his son Humayun struggled for decades, exiled, defeated, then returned. Humayun died in 1556, falling down his library stairs. His son Akbar inherited at just 13 years old. The regent Bayram Khan guided young Akbar, but the boy was learning fast and watching everything. At the Second Battle of Panipat in 1556, the Mughals crushed their rivals. Delhi was secured. The empire was saved. Akbar grew into something rare, a military genius who was also a just administrator and cultural visionary. He attempted Din-i-Ilahi, a synthesis of world religions. Hindu and Muslim intellectuals debated in his court freely. He began building Fatehpur Sikri, a new capital city carved entirely from red sandstone. A wonder of the world. Mughal miniature painting reached extraordinary heights, Persian precision merging with Indian color. A new art form was born. Akbar abolished the jizya, the tax on non-Muslims. Hindus were not subjects to be tolerated. They were equals. He forged alliances with Rajput warriors. Hindu generals commanded Mughal armies. This was an empire built on inclusion. Chapter 10. Japan's transformation. Firearms arrive. A warlord rises. And Japan will never be the same. When Portuguese traders arrived in Japan in 1543, they brought firearms. Japanese warfare changed almost overnight. Japanese craftsmen studied the Portuguese weapons carefully. Within years, they were producing guns that surpassed the originals. Into this transformed world stepped Oda Nobunaga, a ruthless, visionary warlord determined to unify all of Japan. At Okayazama in 1560, Nobunaga defeated a vastly larger army through speed and surprise. His legend was born. At Nagashino in 1575, Nobunaga deployed muskets in organized volley fire. The era of the cavalry charge ended. Jesuit missionaries walked alongside Portuguese traders. Francis Xavier's legacy grew. Japan briefly opened its doors to Christianity. Chapter 11. The Dutch Revolt begins. The richest provinces in Europe refused to be ruled by a king in Madrid. The Netherlands was Spain's wealthiest possession. But Philip II taxed them hard and tolerated no Protestant worship. William of Orange, a Dutch nobleman, quiet but determined, began organizing resistance. History would call him the father of the Netherlands. In 1566, Protestant mobs began destroying Catholic church art across the Netherlands. The iconoclasm had begun. Philip II sent the Duke of Alba with a Spanish army. The message was simple: obey or die. The Council of Blood executed thousands. Protestant and rebel leaders were killed publicly. Terror was the tool of empire. But the Dutch did not break. Sea beggars raided from the water. Guerrilla fighters refused to surrender. The 80 Years' War had begun. the longest independence struggle in European history. Freedom would take generations to win. Chapter 12. Global Connections in 1570. The world is shrinking, and it's happening faster than anyone realizes. In 1571, Spain established Manila in the Philippines. For the first time, the Americas were directly linked to Asia. Silver from Potosi flowed across the Pacific to China. A single global economy was forming, with silver at its heart. The Portuguese in Macau traded with China. Europe had its first permanent foothold in East Asian commerce. The transatlantic slave trade was expanding. Millions of Africans were being transported to work American plantations. Ottoman trade routes still connected Asia to Europe through Istanbul. The old Silk Road still had life in it. Spice prices were falling across Europe. Portuguese supply was abundant. The age of spice scarcity was ending. Chapter 13. The Battle of Lepanto approaches. The greatest naval confrontation of the century is coming. Ottoman naval power controlled the Mediterranean. North Africa, the islands, the trade routes, all under the crescent. In 1570, the Ottomans invaded Cyprus, a Venetian island. This was not a raid. This was conquest. Pope Pius V called for a new crusade. Spain, Venice, and the papacy united. A holy league was formed. Don John of Austria was chosen to command, young, charismatic, burning with faith. His destiny was the sea. Over 200 galleys assembled. The largest Christian fleet in living memory. The Mediterranean showdown was approaching. The Ottoman fleet was equally massive. Ali Pasha commanded with confidence. They had never lost the Mediterranean before. Two great armadas were sailing toward each other. October 1571, the Gulf of Lepanto. History was waiting.
Religious wars will reach their bloodiest.
To be continued in Part 4.
The Council of Trent, Elizabeth's coronation, Ivan's terror, and the French wars. Suleiman's death paved the way for Akbar's rise and the Dutch revolt. Part 4, The Century's End, 1570 to 1600 CE. Coming soon.